So this is Ed Cazalet, and we're doing a re-recording of my presentation for the inaugural Smart Grid Educational Series seminar at Foothill College on March 20th, 2012. And first off, I'd like to thank President Julie Miner and the Foothill College for hosting this event. And in particular, I'd like to express admiration for the fine solar panels they have in their parking lots as we all came to this event. Those solar panels and the power it produces are a fine example for Silicon Valley, and I hope one day every parking lot in Silicon Valley will have such a beautiful system. But the purpose of this seminar today is to talk about electricity primarily from a customer point of view. And we all know where electricity comes from. It comes out of the wall. And but many of us don't get behind that. We just enjoy the benefits of this amazing technology, the flexibility, and its relatively low cost. But now we have a new technology to help us with this, and it's called the smart meter. And PG&E and other California utilities and the California Public Utilities Commission, the legislature, have had the foresight to bring these new tools to us for working with our electricity consumption and helping us to understand what we're buying, what price we're paying, and how to use it more wisely. So everybody has a smart meter in the PG&E territory pretty much right now. If you don't, you soon will. Or if you choose not to, you're going to lose the benefits of having this important tool. Now, my smart meter gives me the following information. When I can log into the PG&E website and see my electricity consumption up through the day before, every 15 minutes of the day. And so what this curve shows that in the middle of the night, the consumption is relatively low. I get up early in the morning, and we do our morning activities, and that's actually the peak of the day for us. Then through the day, the amount of electricity we use varies, and then there's a peak again at night. Everybody's pattern of consumption will be different. And of course, we can learn just from looking at this what we're how we're using electricity, and perhaps even make some savings. So this is all free to customers today. If you look down in the lower right corner of this slide, there's something there that's a green button. And that's a new feature being brought to us by the new smart grid activities to help us automate the use of this meter information to actually download it into other services where it can help analyze not just the consumption we have for every 15 minutes of this previous day, but for the whole previous year. And from that, we'll be able to make better understand how to save money and to save energy. And what's coming, I understand, fairly soon from PG&E and other other utilities, at least in California, is the ability to get the same information directly up to just a few minutes or seconds ago, so you can see in almost real time exactly what you're consuming, and thereby even have greater control and greater understanding of how you're using your electricity. Now, where does the electricity come from? Well, this slide we can use to explain how the electricity gets to that wall socket through your meter. The customer is you, and you may have solar panels, you may have an electric car, you may have some of your own generation, and you may have some other appliances. That power gets to you along the line indicated by the yellow dashed line. First, it comes from the distribution lines that run up and down your street that are at a lower voltage than the transmission lines, and it gets converted into a voltage you can use in your house. Then as you get further out of town beyond your substation, you'll see those high voltage, larger towers. They're called transmission lines that take power from other parts of the state and from the larger bulk generators, such as the hydro and the nuclear and the larger gas generators and perhaps remote wind farms, and bring it to you through this grid. So that when you turn on a light or turn on your toaster, the grid has to adapt all the way back through the generation to deliver to you exactly the amount of power you need at the location where you are. It's a very amazing machine. Now, for many years, the ownership of the bulk generation, transmission, distribution was all owned by one company, such as PG&E in its service territory, and Southern California Edison in its service territory. And they had up at the top operational centers that would control all of this from their particular location. But now, as through federal policy and state policy, we began to open up the provision of generation to alternative suppliers. So now we can have independent generators, not owned by PG&E, and independent generators not owned by Southern California Edison or any other utilities, who will compete among themselves and perhaps with the existing utility generators to provide us the power at the most reliable and potentially the lowest cost way. So that's required the introduction of markets which enable us to help choose the lowest source, and markets like this include markets like the California Independent System Operator and other similar ISO independent system operators and regional transmission operator markets around the country. We also see now the advent of service providers who might help you manage your energy, whether you're a large building or industrial plant or perhaps even a homeowner. And in some cases, they will have the right to sell you energy instead of the local utility, because then they can buy that energy from independent generators or other sources and then compete with the existing sources. So in various parts of the country or in various parts of the California, for some customers, they have the opportunity to buy their energy from service providers, but in some cases just get services to help them manage their energy better. So now as we jump into your domain, the customer domain, we see it's got a lot more character to it than just a pure customer. We have many types of customers. The customers include you in the home, you when you go to work in your commercial buildings, and you when you go to a factory location. And in each of these cases, you're a different type of consumer. In all these cases, you are a consumer, whether you might be an employee or a manager deciding how to use electricity as part of your life, or certainly at home. Some of us live in multi-dwelling buildings, and others will live in single-family residences, but the same factors at work. Within a home, you have a meter, you have appliances, you may have a thermostat to help control that, you may have some kind of solar panel, or perhaps unusually some kind of wind generation for some people. And so that's a little network that provides you with the services you need from electricity. The same thing happens for the buildings, where they may have building and commercial, they may have storage, they may have their own certain heating and cooling and even maybe battery storage and automation of the operation of those buildings. And the same is true for the industrial automation, where you may have automation and pumping loads and machinery and motors and all that sort of thing that have to be managed and controlled to use power. In the center, we have a new actor, which is the electric vehicle. And the electric vehicle certainly has an opportunity to put more load or use more electricity and substitute for gasoline. But it also, in some cases in the future, people contemplate that it could also be a source of storage and a source of power to come back to the grid at various times to help with grid reliability and grid stability. So all of these customer domains need to interact with the rest of the grid. And so the question is, how do we operate all of these devices in all of these home and industrial and building in such a way that it properly interacts with what the grid can deliver to us at whatever prices it can deliver it to us at. So moving on, we have a number of challenges in California and in many other states that make this provision, this interaction between customer and the grid, challenging. And the first one is the fact that the amount of electricity we use at different hours of the year varies a lot. So that there are 8,760 hours in a year typically. And this curve shows for a portion of the California grid, that portion operated by the California Independent System Operator, how the load varies in all the different hours, load or demand, all the different hours of the year. So you see in some cases over on the left, the price of the load is as low as about 17,000 megawatts. That's 17 gigawatts. On the other end of the curve, you can see the price, the load or demand can be much, much higher in the order of 47,000 megawatts or 47 gigawatts. A gigawatt is one very large power plant, like a nuclear power plant, or perhaps two large gas-fired plants. So this is a tremendous range in the utilization of our grid. And of course, we have to have enough generators available, enough transmission available to serve the highest possible load of the placed on the grid, plus a substantial reserve margin in case there are problems with individual generators or individual transmission lines. And so you see that that there's a very large fraction, perhaps 10 to 12,000 megawatts, gigawatts of electricity demand over on the left that is used in the hours between 8,000 and 8,760. So that'd be 760 hours of the year. We use the last 12,000 megawatts of demand or capacity on the grid. And so that means it's not used very often. And so if we can do things to reduce the peak amount of electricity used, and on the other side, we have times when we can't even use all the electricity we're generating. The rivers may be flowing, and the nuclear plants can't get turned down, and the wind may be blowing, where we have too much electricity. So how can we change the utilization of our electric fleet in such a way that it has a higher average utilization? We use more when in the currently low demand hours, and we use less in those other hours. So that's a challenge we face, and to the extent that we can solve that problem, we'll reduce the cost of electricity to everyone. Now, another problem we have, or opportunity, if you want to put it that way, is that in California, we've made a decision to move towards a lot more renewable energy on the grid. In fact, the law says we will have 33% of the energy we need to serve customers come from renewable energy. That's a lot. And that's a very large portion of the generating capacity, because wind and solar typically might be used, generate only 20, 30% of the time. So you've got to have a lot of extra wind and solar capacity in order to generate the required amount of energy, because it has a relatively low capacity factor. But the bigger problem is that the amount of wind we get at any portion of the day and the amount of solar we can get, it can be highly variable. In some cases, the wind will blow steady all day. In other cases, which is typical in much of California, the wind will blow heavily during the night when our power demand is lower, and then suddenly drop off in the morning and then come back up in the evening. Now, fortunately, solar generation, it compensates by, during the day, of course, we get the maximum solar output, but of course we get nothing from it at night. But the fundamental problem for the California grid operator is that very often the solar demand will drop so quick, the wind production drops so quickly, and then the solar production then will jump right up, that we have these big drops and then big increases in the output of renewable power. So that happens in the morning. You see the solar panel power coming up, and the sum of the two, the wind plus solar, the blue curve, is the total of the wind and solar. And then at night, we typically another problem where the wind starts blowing before the sun goes down, so you can have a spike in the total wind and solar, and that might not be easily absorbed by the load. So we have to figure out a way to better match our use of electricity to the natural flow of the renewable energy, or else we have to buy an awful lot of storage to accommodate these fluctuations, or we've got to have a lot of fossil fuel plants, natural gas-fired plants, running all the time or running in standby and quickly ramping up and down to accommodate these fluctuations. And that itself has an environmental penalty and a cost penalty in terms of having that extra capacity around all the time and having to use it often. So that's kind of the second problem. Now, third problem is has to do with the short-term volatility of the solar itself. You look up close on an individual solar plant, and while it's generally higher in the day, clouds come over, the reflection off clouds and that sort of thing, and you get tremendous short-term volatility on the output of the solar. And if that's in a particular location, like out in the Foothill parking lot, you can see that that locally might have a big effect on what's going on the distribution grid. And so if we can do things in terms of how we use power to help us compensate for those fluctuations, then we can put more of this on the local grid. So that's the kind of the third problem. Now, the fourth issue, which I want to address is before we move forward to solutions, is the issue of distributed generation. Governor Jerry Brown has set a policy for the state that we're going to add a lot of distributed generation, that's local solar and local combined heat and power, to the grid, an additional, I think total of 12 gigawatts by 2020. Well, what that means is that a lot of our solar investment will be, and in fact it should be, put on parking lots like out here in the Foothill parking lot. And rather than putting these solar panels out in the desert and building expensive transmission lines to do that. So if we can move more of the generation closer to the loads, build microgrids around it, then we can avoid big investments in new transmission. If we don't have to invest in new transmission, and this, of course, is an advocacy slide by a group that's supporting distributed generation, but if we can avoid a lot of transmission investment, then our costs will go down because eventually we will have paid off the investment in the existing transmission system. It comes down to simply operating the current transmission and doing maintenance and keeping it up to date. So there's a big choice there that if we can move to a more distributed, closer to the load use of electricity from clean, renewable sources, then we can save a lot of investment in transmission. So that's an opportunity and not a problem. So moving on, we have another problem which we can call the Hills problem here, Los Altos Hills, Atherton, others, which is what happens to the distribution grid when we have all these new technologies on the distribution grid. So the story goes here that somebody in a cul-de-sac comes home with a new Tesla, and I picked the Tesla electric car because it is designed and largely manufactured here in California, in particular in Palo Alto, California, where their headquarters are. But for any other electric vehicle, it's the same issue. And it turns out one of those cars, if you want to charge it quickly, can charge at the rate of 17 kilowatts, and it'll charge in about 4 hours, so I'm told. Well, if I have a 50 kilowatt transformer, just for example, on my local distribution system, I can handle that if there's one Tesla. But if my neighbors get envious, another one buys a Tesla, another one, pretty soon they all got it, that poor transformer just can't handle the load. Now, at the same time, we may have air conditioning from the homes and other uses. And at the same time, we may also have generation from solar panels that might typically be put on homes like this. So how do we operate that local grid in such a way that people can charge the cars when they want to and as fast as they want to, yet make it fair to all the customers on that local grid? And how can we deal with a situation where the solar panels may sometimes be producing more power than people want to use during the middle of the day because everybody's off at work? So that's a local challenge, and we need an ability to deal with that using these new smart grid technologies and so on. Now, from the point of view of the utility, okay, it's from a customer who has a lot of solar would typically see most of that solar, would of course see most of that solar production during the middle of the day. Might not be home, might have low load at that point in time. Comes home at night or during in the evening or during the night, he needs electricity, so he's going to draw on the grid for that electricity. It's even possible as we move towards the goal in California of having zero net energy buildings, that the total amount of power generated by the building through solar and other means might approximately equal the total amount of power used by the buildings, but it would be at different times. So then we're using the grid essentially as a storage battery for the homeowner to use power when he wants to and draw on the grid at other times when he has store the power in the grid when he has a surplus. Now, the problem with that is if the utility is getting a net zero sale of power to you, how are they going to pay for the grid services that they have to maintain and keep so that you can have the flexibility to use power when you want to and to sell it when you don't? So that's a problem it faces utilities, but certainly is a burden or certainly is not an issue that consumers have to understand as we move forward. Now, there's another problem, perhaps somewhat unique to California, and that is that our rates aren't just one number. They may be the same number all day, but the more power you consume over the period of a month, the higher your rate. So they're so-called tiered rates, or increasing block rates. So you'll have a baseline amount, which is the blue curve, that today might cost about 13 cents a kilowatt hour. And then you have a tier 2, which is a little higher price. It goes up to for a little more power. And then you have a tier 4. You've got tier 3 and tier 4 and you used to have tier 5 at increasingly higher prices. Now, the baseline amount is some estimate made by the Public Utilities Commission of what certain types of customers might use in your particular area. And as you exceed that total amount of energy over a month, you pay these higher and higher rates. Turns out today many customers are in the higher tiers simply because of the way the baselines are set. Now, this was implemented as a rate strategy for two reasons. One, to encourage efficiency by as you use more, you pay more. But it was also set up to pay for a couple of special programs. One of the programs was to pay off some of the excess money that had to be recovered after the bankruptcies and other problems around 2000, 2001. And it was decided that the higher users, larger users, would pay more of those costs. than the small users, and that was a political decision made by the legislature. The second issue are the low-income rates, or what they call care programs, that have essentially subsidized rates at a lower price. So now, regardless of what you think the merits of that political decision are, the effect is that as there's increasing people on the care rates, and as costs go up, it was decided by the legislature that most of those costs should go into the top tiers. So now that we have those rates are tending to go up much more quickly than the rates in the lower tiers. So a couple of years ago, the rates got so high that there was a rate revolt in Central Valley of California, and the top tier was essentially eliminated, and there was a reduction in rates, and it was allocated to some of the other tiers. And then there was further work recently to try and overcome that and reallocate some of those costs differently so they could bring the top prices down. But according to this projection done by PG&E, along with the other utilities, as the costs continue to go up for various reasons, and because of the allocation of that into the higher rate classes, we're going to be in the same challenge just a few years from now, particularly when we get to 2020 and 33% renewables. And if all of the increases in costs are assigned to the upper tiers, that makes the rate in those upper tiers very costly. So what that means is that people who are paying large amounts, not only is it painful, but they have alternatives. They can put in solar PV panels, and many are doing, that means that they will no longer consume power or as much power at those high rates, and so that will make those who stay on these high rates and don't put in their solar panels pay even more, a larger share of those costs. So this is basically an unsustainable situation, both for we as customers and for the utilities as a business. And so, another issue and key to that is the cross-subsidy between large users and small users. So you see in this slide, the estimates of the cost of serving a customer with a small monthly usage are 25 to 30 cents a kilowatt hour. And for the large users, it's more like 15 cents. But what the rates do is they charge along the black line, so they charge much more to the large user than the small user. It's the same issue as just described in the previous slide. So this is a large amount of money, hundreds of millions of dollars being taken from the large users and allocated to the small users. It's a political decision, but again, if the large users can buy power from the solar panels at 20 cents, many of them are going to go do that and greatly reduce the amount of power they got to buy at these high prices, and those subsidies will never, cross-subsidies will never be available to help out the small users. So again, unsustainable. Now there's hope, okay? And one of the key hopes is that science and studies have proven conclusively that customers respond to price. And this is an assembly of studies put together by the Brattle Group. And there is some 75 studies, I think, pilots done in all parts of the country, a lot of different approaches that show the response of customers to price. So that if I look at the bottom curve, it says the peak to off-peak price ratio. What that's, if it's 2, that means the price in the middle of the day is twice the price it is at night. If it's 10, the price in the middle of the day would be 10 times the price it would be in the middle of the night. And the vertical axis says what percent do we reduce that peak? That was in that previous load curve where it was over on the left side when it went up to 47,000 megawatts. What this says is if the price is high enough, you might reduce that peak by 10, 15, 20, 25%. And what that would mean is we wouldn't have to build so many generators to meet the peak, and if we could do that, we can lower the rates for everyone. So what this says is there's two curves here. One is if you just charge people these prices and they respond using their own intelligence and the change in habits and so on, there's a level of price response. If you also give them thermostats that can automatically respond to price and other smart technology, the response can even be larger. And so this gives us an idea and a hope for how we can help to manage the electricity in a way that customers can save and have a simple signal, the price, to tell when to use more electricity and when to use less. And if we manage it well, it'll save money for everyone. And so this is an example of simple tools. You can go down to Lowe's Hardware and buy one of these thermostats. They're made by a firm in San Francisco. The guts of it are made by another Silicon Valley firm. And of course, the iPhone is one of the tools for communicating with these thermostats. These thermostats are Wi-Fi enabled, so they're on the internet as your phone is. So there's two-way communication. And if we can provide other signals to automate the setting of the temperature as a function of price and still keep you relatively comfortable, then maybe we can save you money and we can help the grid out. So if a thermostat could turn off in the middle of early in the morning when there's a sudden drop in wind, if it could turn off your air conditioning or turn off any electric heat you might have at that point in time, temporarily, you wouldn't feel a significant change in the temperature of the room because it might only be for 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And then when the power returns to a more normal level, it would change the set point on the thermostat to warm you up or cool you down to within your comfortable range. The same would happen in the evening when we might have too much power or too little. And so a simple system like this, all completely automated, set and forget, can handle a lot of the response to prices and give us the kind of responsiveness in that top curve with no loss in comfort and with a lot of and gaining a lot of savings for the grid, which ultimately gets passed on to we as customers. And of course, there are many different technologies like this, my understanding is that PG&E, for example, will be rolling out some of this, their version of many of this technology towards the end of this year, and this will become commonplace for those that want to make good use of their investment, our investment in the smart meters to help save money and work better with the grid. Now, one of the problems is, or an issue here is that much of the cost of delivering power to us, we as consumer, are fixed. The cost of the electric energy itself is only about 19% of the delivered costs, at least for one utility in California, and it's roughly true throughout California. Only about 19% of the costs are getting electricity through, and that's the blue curve, says electric commodity variable cost. There's a fixed commodity cost, which is the cost of paying for the investment in those power plants, those wind machines, or the solar panels. Of course, the solar panels and wind machines don't have any commodity costs. They're just all fixed cost. And so the more we get renewable on the grid that is all fixed and no variable cost, the higher the fixed commodity cost. Now, the 12% over there for the transmission cost is also part of the wholesale cost of electricity. So you add the electric commodity cost, the electric commodity fixed cost, and the transmission cost, and that gives you, says about half of the cost are wholesale costs. The other half are distribution costs or retail adders to the wholesale cost. And that includes the distribution customer costs and demand costs, and various other public purpose programs and other miscellaneous taxes and other things that might fit into the total cost of power. And so if we wanted to have prices that just depend on the prices that come out of the wholesale markets, okay, we're missing a big chunk of the cost. But if we take those fixed costs, and if we want to reduce the fixed costs, we need to charge a higher fixed cost during the hours when we're using the existing investment fully We use all our generating capacity, use up all of our transmission distribution capacity, and charge a much lower cost at times when it's underutilized during the middle of the night, or perhaps when we have other things going on the grid. So we need the fixed and the variable costs to vary by time of the day or by hour of the day or even every 5 minutes in order to get us to do the right thing in the grid, which is not to overuse it and require too much investment, as well as to conserve an amount of energy. So that's a challenge of how do we design rates that can accommodate that. And so this is where we come into some new ideas I've been working on, along with many others, and working on standards at the national level to support this kind of design and to communicate these rates and these prices to customers. And the key is to align the utility and the customer prices and the transactions they make at that prices for both the energy and the fixed infrastructure costs. And by align, I mean that when the utility has to make a long-term investment, that the customer would enter into longer-term forward contracts that would mirror the utility investments. And that when the customer is deciding how much to use in a particular hour or particular time, that the prices would be based not only the incremental cost of generating the energy, but the scarcity that we assign to using the fixed infrastructure. If it's overloaded, we want to charge more. If it's underloaded, we don't. This charging principle is very similar to the charging principle for the fixed costs we have, say, in San Francisco for on-street parking. There's a new system there, uses dynamic prices, where they will adjust the price of the parking space, each parking space, and they have sensors to know whether the parking spaces are full or empty. And in a given neighborhood, they will adjust the price in that neighborhood so that they always have at least 2 parking spaces empty. And so there will be times when the price is very low, perhaps 0. Other times where the price goes very high because there's an event in the neighborhood and everybody's clamoring for the access to that parking spot. And many, instead of going to those parking spots, will go find parking garages because the price in the parking garage will be higher or lower than the price in the parking space. So that's an example of the use of dynamic pricing on a fixed cost, because the cost of those parking lots and all those parking meters is fixed. There's no energy requirement or anything being consumed when you're using those parking lots. The same goes true on our freeways, where there's beginning to be an introduction of special lanes that will have a higher price during rush hour and a lower price at other times. And that way, those who really need the freeway, the faster access to the freeway, can pay for it and help pay for the cost of building additional lanes and maintaining the system. And yet, when those lanes are underutilized, everybody can use them because they'll be free. Same thing goes for San Francisco Giants tickets. The stadiums are now full more of the time because they charge more for the tickets when it's a hot game, and they charge less for others. So people who can't afford the high priority games can also get into the ones perhaps at a discount. Same is true for airlines seats. So all of this has led to higher utilization factors on things like parking lots and stadiums and airliners and that sort of thing, which overall reduces our costs. We need to apply the same principles to electric pricing here in California and around the world. And so what that approach is, it's now if we look at the current ways we price electricity, currently we say in most cases it's a flat price, the same all day long. Now, in California, we have the situation where we have these increasing block rates, these different tiers, but still, when you're in a given tier, the price is flat all day. In fact, it's flat, same flat price pretty much all month and all year if you're in the top tier. So that doesn't provide much of an incentive to use it. And there'll be times when at certain parts of the day, the price is much more expensive than what they're being charged. In other parts of the day, the real cost of the utility is much less. So that those prices flat prices aren't aligned with the underlying cost, underlying utility costs, and we get a mismatch. Now, time of use prices, and what I mean by time of use prices is where the price may be for 12 or 14, 10 say 12 off-peak hours might be lower, and the on-peak hours, 12 on-peak hours, it might be higher. And perhaps during certain days, maybe they have what's called a critical peak price where they greatly increase the price. Now, that's a partial move in the right direction because it begins to align prices more closely with costs. But the critical peak pricing is, it's got to be very high to be useful, so that those people who really need the power during those hours are going to pay a terribly high price, and of course they're not going to know when it's going to happen. So that tends to be a fairly volatile situation, but it's an improvement. The real-time price can produce an exact match, if properly done, between the price on the cost of the utility and the cost to consumers, and there it encourages much better alignment of costs between the customer and the utility. Now, this is only true if we develop real-time prices that aren't just the wholesale price, but include this scarcity pricing that I talked about. It's the same type of pricing we use on our parking meters and our freeways, such that when we have too much demand for the fixed infrastructure, we charge a higher price and lower price at other times. So that's helpful. But many people argue that a real-time price is just too uncertain and too risky, not only for the customer because they have a lot of volatility and they don't know what the price is going to be, but also for the utility because if they're selling all their power at a real-time price, it's like they're making a long-term investment in building infrastructure, and they have to sell it in a spot market with highly volatile prices. And every banker knows you don't borrow long-term and lend short-term, or borrow short-term and lend long-term. You try to align the term structure of your portfolio. So we need a way of getting around that problem and setting our rates. Now, one of the options being proposed by some utilities, because they're concerned about the high amount of costs they're incurring for their infrastructure and the fact that the larger users are beginning to put in solar and bypass their system, that they would like to introduce a customer charge. And a customer charge would be a fixed monthly charge, perhaps by size of customer. It would cover essentially the infrastructure costs. Now, and then to that you'd add something like a real-time price to cover the commodity price. Well, that seems like a good idea. But if you take a close look at it, if you have to pay the customer charge anyway, and your real-time price variable is relatively low, you're probably going to use a lot more electricity and a lot more infrastructure than would really use if we had a proper real-time price signal. And that real-time price signal can't be very large, or the sum of the customer charge and the real-time price signal would be too large. So that's not a very good alternative. So the real solution, which is not a new idea, but a restatement of a very long-term idea, is that you have both forward subscriptions for power and real-time pricing. And the real-time pricing is done on the difference between what you purchase in the forward market and what you actually use. And so we call this the forward purchases transactive subscriptions. And what that is, it's a quantity of electricity that a customer will purchase and be sold to him by a utility, along with the delivery and other related services in each hour of the year at a fixed charge for each hour. And the prices of these should reflect the average of what we would expect the ultimate variable prices to be at the bottom of the curve. So you won't save money by buying forward the subscription on average, but you will have more certainty that for this amount of power. What it will provide is a guaranteed revenue to the utility and a guaranteed supply to the customer. So that's helpful in managing the risk for both parties. Now, ideally, these subscriptions can be purchased and sold so that your utility may sell you some and you may want to add some more from a third party, or if you have to leave the system, if there's a market for these subscriptions, you could sell them back to the utility, perhaps for less than what you're paying for them, or perhaps to a third party or somebody new to the grid. Now, the variable price would be applied to the baseline or the amount of electricity you contracted for under the subscriptions. So in each hour or each 15-minute interval of the hour, the price could be different, and the price could be very different. And so that in any 15-minute interval or hour, depending on how we want to do the metering, if you use less than what you forward contracted for under the subscription, you get a credit. You get a credit for the amount of power you didn't use, and you get a credit at the price, current variable price. So the current variable price is very high, and you have a smart thermostat like we talked about, or just an ability to watch the price, or you just have some other devices in the home, such as your pool pumps turning off, or your refrigeration being slightly modified, or your electric dryers being used at a different time, or your dishwashers being shifted in their usage. You could get a very large credit when the price is very high by using less than what you contracted for. And this can be done all automatically so that you don't have to think about it. At the same time, if the variable price is higher, if you use more than what you contracted for, and at that point in time the variable price is very high, okay, you will pay a lot. So that gives you an incentive to avoid using that much electricity. If it happens you use more and the price is low, say when there's too much wind or too much solar on the grid, excess supply, we want to encourage you to use more, because that means we're taking that renewable wind power and other things and not wasting it. You might use that for cooling your house at a particular time, making ice for later use on the grid for cooling, or pumping water, or whatever other activities can be shifted slightly in time. So this provides the complete, very strong incentives for everybody and their automated devices to respond to price. It protects everyone who signs up for these subscriptions to having whatever amount of power they want delivered at a fixed charge. And it aligns the incentives of the utility with the customer so that then they can make their investments and be assured that the customer is going to pay the fixed cost of those investments, while at the same time not over-investing, because when we have overutilization of our transmission, distribution, generation, the price will get very high and people will do things to shift their utilization of electricity. That will reduce, again, the overall cost of electricity because we're building less infrastructure, and the savings will get passed on to customers through lower average rates. So this is win-win, and it's particularly important as we put renewables on the grid, because what we talked earlier about the high volatility of those renewables and the ability using price to get the devices we have to follow the output of wind and solar. And so what this means is this concept of transactive subscriptions and the variable price associated with them is the subscriptions are an obligation of both the utility and the customer. So that's good because the customer is obligated to pay the investment of the utility, and the utility is obligated to deliver a product that the customer signed up for. We can still, to the extent the politics support it, provide subsidized low-price subscription for care customers. So that's just, they just get the forward contract at a discount if that's the way the state wants to do that. But they would still face the same incentives to conserve power or save power. And so if they can use more power when it's cheap and use less power when it's expensive, they can even further reduce their bills. So that makes sense for everybody because it reduces the total cost of power. Everybody, again, will have equal incentives to respond to the scarcity or abundance of our infrastructure and the energy we're producing. This new system hedges risk for both the customer and the utility. So we don't have to be, we can allow ourselves to be exposed to these volatile prices, both as a utility and a customer, yet we have a fundamental hedge built in because we have these forward subscriptions for power for fixed quantities of power. Now, what this means is lower costs, more renewables on the grid, and improved reliability, because if we get in situations where we just don't have enough power available, the price we can go up to very high levels, and our automated thermostats and pumps and that sort of thing will shut off very quickly and provide us with increased reliability rather than us having to build excessive reserve margins into the grid, which means additional power plants to protect against the unlikely event that we have several power plants go down together. So this is even further savings in terms of improved reliability at a lower cost. Now, California had an unfortunate experience with moving to competition in the past about a decade ago. And the principal cause, one of the principal causes of that was the type of rate structure we developed. The rate structure under the transition to competition the last time around was essentially utilities had to buy most of their power at spot prices, and yet they were selling it to us at a price that was flat, and in fact, a price that was capped. So what happened during that crisis, for various reasons, the wholesale price went up very high, and you can blame that on either nature or the improper actions of various parties. But in any case, the price went up very high. Well, companies like PG&E in Southern California had a price cap imposed on the retail price, which was put in by the legislature, ostensibly to protect customers. What that meant is there were times when a company like PG&E was paying 4 times at wholesale what they're selling at retail. It was unsustainable. And so they went into bankruptcy, and Southern California Edison went there too. Well, that didn't help we as customers, because the state legislature ended up bailing them out and charging us for the cost of those problems. So that's not something that we ought to cheer on to put our utilities in bankruptcy, because either way we're going to pay. So I believe that this transactive approach with these highly variable prices it aligns the risks and rewards and creates incentives so that we can have a stable California market. And what this means is, for example, as we move to competition, we don't just you don't just move 100% from PG&E to some competitor, but you might take half of your current consumption as a transactive subscription from PG&E and the other half from some new green energy provider or somebody else. Or you might take what you have from PG&E and sell it to somebody else who wants more of the PG&E service, and then you can buy entirety from some new competitor. So that transition to competition, where it would eliminate the risks of stranded costs for the utilities, it would give us the flexibility to move step by step into competition. And you can do that through this transactive subscription approach, which protects both the customer and the utility. So this isn't all about just trying to avoid problems. There's really a tremendous future if we move this direction. This is a future in which, if you take this vision further, we have many types of customers in the market, residential, commercial, as shown in this picture. And each of these customers, of course, draws power today from various retail markets, usually the local utility. There are electric vehicles coming in, local generation that can be at your home, storage. So there's tremendous technology change going on in terms of how we consume power. Many customers will begin generating their own power. Other customers may want to buy power from their neighbors when they're not home. And so we need an infrastructure that allows basically any party, any customer, and any generator and any other entity in the market to buy power from whomever they want, sell it to whoever else they want. And of course, they also need not only to buy that power, but also buy the means, the transmission, the distribution. I call them transport to get the power from where it's generated to where it's being used. And so we can create this infrastructure of transactions all based on simple, the rate structures I just described of forward transactions that are subscriptions and variable prices for dealing with the fact that we don't always know exactly what we're going to consume, and that the price can tremendously vary. And when it does vary, it's going to be the result of what's going on in the grid in terms of scarcity of too much wind or not enough transmission capacity, or and so on. So through this mechanism, we can set up a system that is much more flexible, will accommodate many new types of businesses and reduce investment and move us forward. As a side benefit, all of this requires Silicon Valley technology. Silicon Valley technology to build these thermostats that we talked about, Silicon Valley technology to control the other devices, Silicon Valley technology for the cloud servers and the software and all that sort of thing that can be used to help manage a market like this automatically. The new generation of customers, a fraction of my grandkids' age, understand this new world. They want to participate in this new world. They're iPhone generation, and they can't understand why they can't buy the power where they want to, use social media to talk about how to use it, and move forward. And we need to enable that, and if we don't, they will. So this is not a problem, but an opportunity to create a new world. And if we can be the first in Silicon Valley to move this vision forward, we have technology and ideas and systems we can deploy around the world and benefit everybody. And of course, educational institutions such as the Foothill College here can help us develop those new leaders and those new people to write the software and operate the system and sell it around the world in a way that creates jobs and opportunities for many. So appreciate this opportunity for this very quick introduction to the opportunities and problems for electricity in California, the vision and the opportunities that the smart grid brings to us. And if we work together as customers with our legislature, with our utilities, with our regulators, I think we can improve this. And as I come to the last point, which I want to make too, when it comes to electricity, the customer needs to take charge. Utilities generally follow the lead of the regulators and the legislature. So if we can get our legislatures to support change like this and get them to understand it, because the legislatures, they're not experts in electricity, so they can make mistakes in writing legislation. And often they do compromises in good faith trying to help us. This is when they put the price caps on retail prices because they thought they were helping us, but in fact it turned out to be a problem for us all. So if we can get them to understand, and these are not hard concepts to understand because everybody understands the difference between buying something ahead of time and buying something at the last minute, whether it's airline tickets or making a reservation for dinner or whatever it might be. So when it comes to electricity, the same principles for commerce should apply to electricity as they apply to everything else. And we need to move that direction. And I think the utilities and the regulators and the legislature need to hear from we, the customer, that we want to see a new way of doing business. A new way of doing business is very much like we do business for every other important commodity we use, whether it's food or anything else. We understand that prices vary, whether it's gasoline and so on. And some of us will make investments in different ways of using these resources. Some of us will put in solar panels and make the long-term investment. Others will want to buy things at the last minute. We can accommodate everybody's preferences with a system like this. And then as we move to the next round of restructuring, which is going to be forced onto us by the current unsustainable rate structures we have today, as we talked about in the earlier slides, we're at a crisis right now where we have to make decisions. And these decisions may get made by the legislature the wrong way, not because they are trying to help any particular party or hurt any party, but just out of lack of knowledge. And so if we together can bring this message to the legislature and to the utilities and to the Public Utilities Commission, I'm sure they will be responsive and will build an electric system that can meet the customer needs and provide us with a green environment in California and at the lowest possible cost. Appreciate this, taking the time to listen to this quick run through on Transactive Energy. Feel free to contact me at www.temix.com or at ed@temix.net, and if you'd like further information, and I look forward to working with you to support this new vision. Thank you very much.